representing Baha'i Institute of Higher Education. We will be with you momentarily. We're trying to fix some technical difficulty, as it is customary with every conference, that something has to go wrong. It has to go wrong. So we fixed the sound, I think. Can you hear me well? Yes. All right. Now, we're going to, I guess, start that.
It should be up tomorrow. Okay. Whatever.
All right, so we don't have much time because we started late, so we've been cut short a little bit. So I have a little bit of introduction about BIHE, Baha'i Institute of Higher Education, and what that institute is. As you all know, a lot happened and a lot changed with the new regime in Iran, and one of the things was that, of course, minority groups were put through a lot of challenges. One of the challenges that the Baha'i faith was put through was, of course, education and many other things that you've heard in the news. I'm sure I'm not going to review the history with you, because I'm sure everyone sitting here at least has heard one or two things about the Baha'i faith and the Baha'is of Iran. So I'm going to focus on the education. One of the things that the current regime of Iran had made extremely challenging for Baha'i youth was the higher education ban, which was if you were a Baha'i, you could not enter the university. And how do they know if you were a Baha'i? Well, in the application, there is a religion choice that you have to choose, and if you are other and you put Baha'i, that automatically prevents you from going to university, regardless of your score on the entrance exam. So the question is usually that I'm asked is, then how, why don't they just not say they're Baha'is? Well, if they're saying not Baha'i and be able to go to the university, now they're basically denying the principles that they believe in. So that would not have been a good solution. So what the solution was the Baha'i population in Iran, the scholarly Baha'i population in Iran, had to come up with a solution for this problem, that the Baha'i youth could not have continued with higher education. And the solution was that the Baha'i community should teach their own. And this started as a really great idea, a home-to-home sort of a teaching, and scholars who had also been expelled or been taken, their jobs were taken away because they were Baha'is. These university professors had no jobs, so instead of sitting home and feeling sorry for themselves, they started starting classes for the Baha'i youth. And that gradually kind of grew into something bigger, from just skill building to something more academic. And throughout the years, in 1987, eventually it became an institute where in Iran, professors were teaching classes such as psychology, sociology, pharmaceutical, pre-dental school. So it started becoming a real academic institution, and eventually, after 30-some years, it has become at the same level of any other institution around the world, to the point that more than 67 universities across the globe now accept Baha'i graduates, and they are given them entrance to go and pursue higher education. So from an idea that was house to house, now it has become a global move for educating Baha'i students. Now, of course, it hasn't been without challenge. A lot of these professors who are teaching in Iran currently have been continuously and repeatedly arrested, for the crime only being that they're teaching. So it hasn't been without challenges. A lot of us outside of Iran have also volunteered to teach at this university, voluntarily, of course, because this university does not charge tuition and we don't get paid for it. So it's basically a service to humanity. I myself have been one of the professors in the Department of Psychology. We have other scholars here. I do not want to name them if they don't want to be named. I did not get their permission, but we have many other scholars that are currently teaching the BIHE, Baha'i Institute of Higher Education, are sitting here among you, and I hope that you get a chance to talk to them during the break and get to know more about an institution that started as a thought and turned into a global movement. It's quite fascinating, and I myself, and I know this is kind of selfish of me, but I like to think of it as the 21st century miracle. That's how I think of it. So for this conference, and I know I don't have much time, and I'm sure Dr. Jafari will be giving me the time signal soon, but we have a few research that we have done for this conference that we're presenting. However, the research we've been doing is not anything new. We started doing research, field research, that is, I'm not talking about literature review or review of previous research. These are field research done in the communities of Iran, different cities, different metropolitan areas. And we've been doing this research because we believe that we need to look into what is happening structurally to the Iranian community, Iranian society. We have an obligation to find out what is going on. And to be honest with you, Iran itself as a country claims to be number 3 in highest published country. Now, I'm not going to go there and start talking about how that is even possible when Iran does not even obey with the copyrights, the global copyrights. I know that because I published a book and we wanted to translate it in Farsi, and my publisher was trying to get the Iranian publisher, and then they said, well, look, we don't abide by any global publishing rights. So there you have it. If Iran doesn't abide, so anything could be published. Now, that is not to downgrade any good work coming from Iran, but good work coming from Iran, as far as research is concerned, is scarce and very difficult, as you all know. If anybody starts to do research in Iran, immediately they will be labeled as a spies. So this sort of work has to be done very with safety in mind. So, going back to 5 years, we started doing research. We've been presenting at different international conferences, even national conferences. We've been publishing these research data. But our goal is not just to do research and publish. That is not what we're after. What we're after is to get to real data of what's going on in society of Iran. And also, after doing research, we do assessment, and after assessment, we do education. And that's why Dr. Jafari was mentioning my non-profit organization, and that's exactly what we do. We do research assessment. One of those research assessment is one of the studies. So quickly, I think, do I have half hour or less?
More than that, 35 minutes.
Oh, thank you. I was just given extra time. You know how much I love to talk. Thank you. So one of these research studies that will show you how it turned from research to assessment and then to education is narrative therapy for children of labor. We all know that globally we're having an epidemic of children of labor, children that are either runaways or have been kidnapped, or by their own parents have been sold, or by the force of economic depression have to work in order to bring an income. So I'm going to share one of those that went from research to actual. That is not my phone, I promise you. Because I do not know that ring. All right, so let me tell you a little bit about this. So what happened? Oh, there we go. So what happened about 3-4 years ago? And by the way, I want to introduce our BIHE students who made it here and they got visa miraculously. Out of 7, only 2 were able to secure visa to come here. And one of the other BIHE students coming from New York, we have Ms. Sagar Janamian, right there. She just came here 2 days ago, 3 days ago. We have Ms. Nahme Shadabi, also 2 days ago. And of course, we have Ms. Mona Atifat. She is a BIHE student, currently having graduated master's in it. This is a miracle that I was talking about. She got her bachelor's from BIHE and then traveled to America, got her master's from Columbia University in psychology, and now she's pursuing PhD in Long Island University, one of the most famed universities in psychology, and she's currently a PhD applicant. So we're happy to have you all, and the rest of the students who could not have made it because of these, the new executive order that put Iran as a, yes, you all know about that. I'm not going to go over that because it makes me really angry, and I shouldn't be angry in public. Only in private, my husband can attest to that. By the way, and that is my
you can ask me later.
That usually accompanies me and helps me. Thank you, honey. All right. So the rest of them who couldn't get visa, they're on Skype, are listening right now, and they are sending you their love, and they wish they were here with you. All right. So this, I think I need help with this, my dear young man.
Hello.
It's the one I put my mouse
So this is not an Apple. I don't know how to work with any other computer, only Apple. So anyways, can you get it?
Yes, it's the use of narrative there.
All right, so this study started with Nusha and Shabnam, the ones that couldn't get visa on their Iran, they're on the Skype listening. So this study started a few years ago, 3-4 years ago. Nusha brought to my attention. And by the way, our topics are usually researched very well. We don't just do any topics. It may take us 6 months to a year just to study a topic to see whether or not if it is a good fit for research. So this one, Nusha came to me and said, I'm passionate about these street children. They're working 8 to 12, 14 hours a day for minimum money so that they can support their family. And I would like to study this group and see what kind of cognitive and psychological damage they might suffer from not going to formal school, because from 5 years on, we had the youngest subject of our study was 5 years old and the oldest was 14. So Nusha studied this 5 years ago, about 4 years ago. 4 years ago, we presented this in Malaysia, and after that, we said, okay, what are we going to do about this? We showed through data that these children could not even make a simple wish. I mean, that's a tragedy for a 14-year-old not to be able to express their feelings. We call that emotional intelligence. These kids had not developed any of that. When 14-year-olds didn't know what making a wish is, how to make a wish, and they didn't know what that meant. Emotionally, they were deprived. So we did that. We showed data that it is really true. There is a delayed psychological emotional problem and cognitive development with these children. So later we thought, okay, what are we going to do about it? Is there something we can do to at least repair some of that damage? So we decided to study these children using narrative therapy. Narrative therapy is not very popular in the United States, but very well used across the United States. So the hypothesis was that we could use this narrative therapy as an instrument to teach these children after having read to them. So this was an experimental research. We had a treatment involved here. So after having read stories that we could relate to, and the stories where we picked 14 stories, these stories were taken and chosen very, very carefully to represent what we were looking for. What we were looking for was to be able to express yourself, to be able to express self-concept. So therefore, through those stories and storytelling afterwards, so the stories were read to them and then they were able to put themselves in those stories. And with songs, my team, Shabnam and Nusha, were able to show that eventually, after the end of narrative therapy, that we had a time frame of 3 to 5 months, and it took us about 4.5 months. And I have to tell you something else about these children of labor. These children of labor are not what you think. We found out through the first research that there are 2 types of children of labor. The first type are immigrant children that have come from Afghanistan. Those were easy to find because I have to tell you what Nusha had to do in the first research in order to find a group that we could assemble in one area. Because as you know, these kids are scattered all over town trying to make a penny here and there. So it was hard. We did that in the first research, and in that research we found out there are immigrant children and they are Iranian children, citizens of Iran. And they are in worse shape. How are they in worse shape? The fact that they are sold by their parents to, for drug money and everything else. So those were impossible to assemble because they had a ringleader that would come and pick them up. And a couple of times my researcher had to be chased away because she tried to approach them. So we didn't study them. We studied the immigrant children that were to be, it's kind of like a dichotomy when I say this, that those children were in a better place, the immigrant children, because they would go home to their parents at home. Just imagine how things are if you think you're an immigrant children. Kind of like the immigrant children here, they have the same problem. There's no green card, they will not be able to get a green card at any time. So their biggest fear of this child of labor was to get arrested and to be found out. So that was their biggest. The other group, like I said, we couldn't even study them because it's impossible. So anyways, through these stories, we were able to somehow bring making a wish, expressing a wish, making a connection with another person possible. So story therapy proved to be very relevant here. All right, so our population were sample age 9 to 12 years of age for this one. For the first one, that sample age was 5 to 14. For this one was 9 to 12. And NGOs are basically non-profit organizations. In Iran, they call them a non-government organization. So we found an NGO that was willing, actually, to let us do this. So these children get a semi-formal education from these NGOs. Those of you who are from Iran, you know what I'm talking about. How many of you know what is happening at NGOs in Iran? I know yes. So that's what, of course, my dear friend, Ms. Sheila Kashef, of course you know, because you have an NGO that takes care of, dedicate its time to educating children. I know that you know this very well. So we've talked about emotional intelligence, interpersonal, so these were some of the things we work with these children. And at the end, I have to tell you, of course, research showed that, yes, it is possible to use narrative therapy to bring some of these lost cognitive and emotional development that should have happened between birth and 5 years of age. Some were able to be repaired. But I tell you, you can never be repaired, as my good friend Dr. Fujan Zaini will tell you. Early childhood deprivation, it really damages the rest of your life. So that was one research, and I know I already talked about that. My good man, I need your help again. I think we need to ask him to stay. Are you here? Hello? Are you in the back
he's back here.
Are you trying to hide from me? I need to go to the next one. So that was one research we did. Other research, I'm going to go over the research that research assistants here have done, so they can also contribute because we don't have much time and I can't go over all the research. But we did several other research that the research assistants on the Skype right now know. One was parenting style, so I tell you very quickly what happened. When I was in Iran last summer, so I want to go to research. So last year I went to Iran for a family emergency because I normally, I'm not comfortable doing this. So I went to Iran for that purpose, and I noticed that parents that I see on the subway, and I was really adamant about taking the bus, taking the train, the subway train, because I wanted to see people for my own. I wanted to make a lot of observations. So what I noticed was parents and child behavior is extremely different than what I'm used to and what we scientifically study. Some of you are familiar with Baumrin, Diana Baumrin, who came up with 3 parenting styles, and another one was added later on. And I was trying to put a label to what I was seeing between child-parent interaction to see, okay, which one of these are the Iranians after revolution? So what have they done with their parenting style? And I couldn't find a title from what I knew to label parenting style in Iran. So we were discussing it. I was in Iran. I was fortunate enough to meet with my research team in Iran, and we discussed it, and we said, we've got to study this. I'm dying to find out. So after we did the Bombardian explorative research on that, we found out that actually parenting style in Iran is a mix-up. We call it ash shogarampar, you know. It's a mix-up of a lot of beans and, soup. Soup of all beans is what the best I can come up with. So what we came up is that regardless of income in Iran, and we always thought that income would be a factor, a variable in determining parenting style, because that's what the Western world has determined, that parenting style and SES, socioeconomic status, are correlated. But we couldn't figure that out. So we figured out in Iran, regardless of your SES, parents are equally permissive, they're equally authoritarian, and they're equally authoritative. How can you even be equally of all three? And we couldn't find neglectful, so there's a plus for parents in Iran. Because they were not neglectful in any way. But so we called it the Iranian mixed parenting. I have not come up with a better title for it. I will, because I'm going to, make this a theory and named after myself. Maybe I'll give some credit to my research assistants. But I think we have come up with a new thing. And Dr. Jafari, I would like to research this further and see really whether or not a change in a structure of a society will create a new parenting style, and that may very well be. So we further discuss that, and we'll research it. Another one that, so we're going to discuss another research that my team here has done. Now, Sagar is here. Sagar Janamian is here. Sagar Rafahipur, is she on Skype?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, Sagar. Sagar is on Skype, and Samin Sabri is also in Iran. Is she on Skype? Perfect. And Mona. Mona, raise your hand. Mona is here. So we collectively wanted to study, because in Iran, and this has been documented, this isn't something what we discovered, in Iran, it has been documented that relationships are based on very superficial factors. Things such as, maybe my boyfriend can buy me, better designer clothes, or maybe my girlfriend, could be with me so I don't feel alone. So they did a documentary on that. You can YouTube it. The documentary is available. And these young people were really talking about how, the standards have changed, how there is no depth in quality of relationship. And again, while I was in Iran, I was watching men and women, young men and women walking together, and you could tell the body language. And I just was in awe of how body language between young couples have changed. Even though 20 years ago, if you walked with an opposite sex, you could be arrested. But 20 years later, fast forward, it was easily, people would walk together, hold hands together, they would have all this kind of superficial, visual and non-verbal communication. I was amazed by that. I couldn't have seen that anywhere else. So we decided to study that, and what we